So, Dave, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the actual seven rings that we get to see in this episode. We all know that there was the seven rings for the dwarves, and actually the title of this episode is Halls of Stone, and that's mentioned. That's a nod to the dwarves because in the poem for the ring, we know it's three rings for the elven kings under the sky, and this is seven for the dwarf lords in their halls of stone. So in their halls of stone, that's the name of the episode. So it kind of shows this is an important part of this episode. It's going to be focused on the dwarves and their seven rings. So we get to see them. First of all, what were your first thoughts on the cool blinginess of these rings?
Yeah, I thought the main one that Durin the third picks up is quite cool. The blue jewel that's in it. Now I
Mm,
thought the rest of them might have been a little bit more plain. I think there was one red one there, and the rest are kind of like black, just stones. So the look of them was grand. The actual hearing of the voices whispering is kind
mm.
of like supposed to be reminiscent of Sauron's whispering when you hear the or when you see the One Ring in the Fellowship of the or sorry in the Peter Jackson's trilogy. So yeah, I don't know what to think about that. I'm kind of okay with it because I don't think it's a big enough deal for me to say like, oh, that's not canon, that's not lore. I think it's just for to remind people what these rings are. It comes from the same ilk of the One Ring of Power. These are rings of power, so they're going to have a little bit of the same
The same
tendencies.
ring craft.
Yeah. But yeah, they were cool. They have their powers. What did you think of their powers?
I mean, well, first of all, the design, I thought the main one that we get to see front and
Mm.
center was definitely very, very cool. It's enormous. Like, and then we see later in the episode that Jordan has to take off the ring at one point because he says that his hand is feeling heavy. So he takes off his ring because it's just a massive jewel on top of his ring. So it looks, from just the visual, I think it looks class.
It's
Um,
also a callback to like the heavy burden of the One Ring as well. Like Frodo talks about how heavy it is
mm,
on his neck. So I think it's just another thing, the Ring of
yeah,
Power.
yeah. Actually, I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, that's probably right. Um, that it was a bit weird now. I have to say that when he puts it on and then he's like holding the ring and he's going around tapping the rock at different points, like here, dig here, and then
It's like a metal detector.
yeah, and then like I mean he explains like the magic behind the ring, I suppose, where he says the stone singers they can hear the mountain, but with this ring I can see it, and he says he can see every crevice and every jewel and every whatever, so he's like I don't know, he's suddenly got these 3D goggles or something that he's able to, or sorry, X-ray vision goggles that he can just like
Yeah.
look through the mountain and just see everything that's going on. And he talks about how they've only barely taken a thimble of the ocean of wealth in this mountain, which is kind of cool as well. So we can see he's definitely going to become greedy. But I think for me, I think you would agree that the speed at which he has just gone down this path of going from someone who was not technically that greedy for a dwarf to now becoming like just letting their greed take over their personality, and now he's sort of blinded by that, and he had all these restrictions in place before of okay, we can't delve down below that level because it's not safe. He wouldn't let in season one, he wouldn't let his son Durin the fourth um go mining for mithril because it was unsafe as well, and now suddenly he's just like doesn't care about the safety of his men.
Doesn't care
He's like,
about
okay,
foundation rocks.
yeah, that's a foundation wall, is what his son says to him, and he's like, I don't care. And again,
Dig.
it wasn't really a foundation wall in the end, was it?
No.
When he was able to just put a small, like half a foot of a hole into it, and it's like, oh, it's sunlight. So it's yeah, I don't know. That was a bit weird. I don't know why they had to choose for it to be a foundation wall, but it was to make the point, I suppose. Like you better listen to me
Yeah.
because I know what I'm doing with this ring. But yeah, I think what did you make of the speed at which he kind of descended into this kind of greed madness, or kind of like what happened
Yeah.
to Thorin, I suppose, as well.
Yeah, well, Thorin's thing, I suppose, in the film, it was like
Dragon
dragon
sickness.
sickness,
Hmm.
and that's very reminiscent of what's happening to Durin here. But like we know that the dwarves were not corrupted by the rings of power. Like it just like
In that
enhanced their
way, yeah.
already, yeah, in that way their greediness was already enhanced. So I think it was a silly decision to to actively say that Durin wasn't greedy beforehand when he's a dwarf. They're kind of greedy, they're
Mm,
stubborn, so he should be an extra level of greedy because he's the king, but also now he's getting a ring of power and it should like exponentially like increase his greediness. So I thought it was
yeah, but
silly because
before
they're
he was
trying.
like a philanthropist dwarf,
That's what
just kind of like giving
that's what I
away his
mean.
wealth. Or yeah.
They
So
shouldn't have had such a drastic change to his character. It should be
yeah,
just him. But
enhancing or yeah,
it's hard to do that in a TV show. Even though like a TV show, we often talk about this is where you get the most amount of time to spend with characters, but not. I think movies you actually get more time because in TV shows what they like to do is introduce like 17 different plots and you have to add new characters and new plots to every single season. So you actually lose time with a lot
yeah.
of the core cast. So it is difficult. You think you have so much time to develop these plot lines, but you really don't. So I can understand where they're coming from. But then again, we've talked about this before. How does this ring get passed down from generation to generation? Because that's what the dwarves should be doing. In fact,
Yeah.
the only thing it does is amplify their greediness so that they go and get wealthier and wealthier, dig too deep, too greedily, and that's what eventually is the downfall of the dwarves, but not this quickly. So I
And
don't know.
also the thing is that they get these rings, and that, as you said there, it amplifies their greed, and that is true that it does, but it doesn't do it to an extent that it's obvious to the people around them. Like
No, definitely not.
like the
Shouldn't
dwarves
be.
themselves, the dwarves themselves certainly don't realize that they're. It's kind of just it's turning their greediness from like a 10 up to an 11. So it's just like,
Yeah,
it's kind of like to use a Spinal Tap reference there. But it's not like from the outside, it's not like, oh my God, he's had a complete change of character. And we've already spoken about how the actor, what's his name?
Peter Mullen.
Peter. I was going to say Paul Mullen. Peter Mullen. We've already spoken about how his kind of notes that he was given for the scene was to kind of be like a junkie, in his own words, to kind of just be an addict who's like trying to get their next fix. And again, if you can build to that, that would be great. But it seems like he's put on this ring, and then literally the next morning he's woken up and he's completely addicted, and his character is completely changed. And all the people around him, Narvi is looking at him like, "What do you mean? Like you're forgetting that you took off the ring 2 minutes ago. You're blaming me that I took it or something. You're striking these restrictions that you yourself put in place years and years ago. I don't know, just."
Mm,
So like all of these things, everyone around him and his son as well is coming up trying to convince him. He's like, Father, there's some evil, there's some malice in this ring. You can't use it. So everyone around him, it's like, as I said, if someone in your family is an addict and they can't see the problem, but everybody else around them can see the problem. That's kind of what they're trying to show in the situation. Whereas in the reality,
yeah,
it should be that nobody really knows that they're just kind of going, this is just our character. We are greedy by nature, which they are, but it should be just amplified up a little bit so that it kind of stops them from going outside and interacting with the rest of the outside world. They kind of just get kind of locked into what they're doing. Remember, by the way, we should say that this was a failure by Sauron. He wasn't intending for this
yeah,
to happen. He was intending that they would just follow the ways of the men, and that they would get completely overpowered by the rings, and they would fall to its they would fall under the power of the rings completely, and he would be able to control them. Whereas Sauron ended up not being able to control the seven dwarves, the seven rings. So because he didn't account for their strength and their strong wills, and he just basically didn't realize that they were much more powerful with resisting the power of these rings. So unfortunately, we're not getting that power of resistance to the rings, which is another
no,
thing that just puts these dwarves up on a level that we should really respect the dwarves. I'm not too
yeah.
sure.
The resilience of the rings from the dwarves is, yeah, it's not seen. And another thing that is changed as well is that we've talked about it before. Actually, if you want to check out our podcast where we discuss with Robert in Deep Geek, episode 5, we talk about how there's so many butterfly effects from season 1. And one of the things was the fact that they made the three elven rings first, when originally it's supposed to
Mm,
be Sauron creating 16 rings of power, and who he probably thinks he's going to give them all out to elves. But this time he makes the three, or sorry, the three are kind of made with him in the background. He doesn't touch them. But now we've got the seven dwarven rings that are being created with the dwarves and the elves. And now the king of Khazad-dûm is gifting them out to dwarf lords. So it's just it feels like
it's a
I've
lot of
talked about it
changes.
before. Yeah, it's like we don't know why the writers went the way they did, but now it's like they're trying to write themselves out of all the changes that they've made, and you just kind of feel like, right, I
This could
hope
have
they
been
do it
avoided.
okay. But yeah, I just don't know why. I don't know. I feel like everything they did in season one was to service the plot of the mystery box of who Halbrand and Sauron and Stranger is, whereas
Mm,
we're all done with that now. Like we're going to find out who the Stranger is at the end of this season,
yeah.
and all the other mystery box stuff is over with. So like, I just feel like, did you really need to sacrifice 5 seasons of a TV show just to service that one season of mystery box wonder? But anyways,
Yeah.
yeah, those are my thoughts on the Rings of Power,
On the actual seven rings of power that we're talking
the
about, not on
seven
the rings
Rings
of
of Power.
power, the show as a whole.
Yeah,
But yeah, please, lads, everyone, guys and girls, get in the comments and let us know what you thought about the seven rings. Tell me what you thought about them, their appearance. Do you think that they looked cool? Would you wear one of these rings? Not would you get, like, corrupted by the Dark Lord, but would you just wear it as a piece of jewelry and for as a fashion statement? Because I don't know if it'll suit me, a ring that giant, but I definitely would like to be able to pull it off as well as Durin III does, because it suits him for sure. Let
true.
us know what you thought about these little changes. Do you think that these initial order of having the three rings be made first instead of being made last, the knock-on effects that we're getting from that, do you think that they're working well? I know that we're saying that they're not really following the lore here, but maybe you could say, oh, well, for a television show, maybe this was the correct choice. So yeah, let us know what you think about that as well.